In Manhattan, $1 million buys silence, but it cannot buy the dignity of a predator when he realizes he is the prey. 3 hours ago, my husband thought he shipped a penniless orphan out of the country. He never suspected the penthouse key he gave his mistress actually unlocks a hell designed to incinerate his career. Do not look away. What happens in that house at 4 o'clock today will permanently redefine the word revenge. Hello, wonderful audience of Violet Revenge Stories. YouTube recently disabled our monetization features, so we currently have zero budget to keep this channel running. If you find today's story captivating, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can provide our hardworking staff with the means to live and continue creating these thrilling revenge stories for you. You can easily support us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link found in the description or the comment section of this video. Thank you for listening. My name is Elena James, and this is my story. The first-class lounge of the Delta Terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport is a sanctuary designed to make the wealthy forget they are in transit. The air conditioning hums at a perfect, frigid temperature, masking the stench of jet fuel from the tarmac below. I sat sunken into a plush leather armchair, holding a one-way ticket to London, not Paris, which was the romantic decoy destination my husband originally suggested to get me out of the country. I simply stared at the morning sunlight cutting through the heavy glass windows, catching the condensation dripping down my $25 cold brew coffee. The ice clinked softly against the rim, a sharp, crisp sound in the muted atmosphere of the lounge. Everything around me screamed luxury, yet it all felt incredibly hollow. My phone buzzed against the mahogany side table. The screen lit up with a message from Julian Vance, the man I had called my husband for the past 3 years. The text read exactly like one of his corporate memos. "The merger deal at Apex Capital is holding me up. You go through security first. Do not wait for me." A younger, more naive version of myself might have felt a pang of disappointment or even shed a tear right there in the VIP lounge, but I felt absolutely nothing. There was no devastation, no heartbreak, only the cold, mechanical precision of a predator watching a rat walk willingly into a trap. I knew exactly what kind of merger deal was keeping him so occupied. Apex Capital was not just his workplace. It was the private playground where he was eagerly suffocating our marriage in the arms of the new vice chairwoman of the board, Cynthia Locklear. I also knew a secret that Julian thought he had buried deep beneath layers of corporate NDAs and burner phones. The child currently growing inside Cynthia's womb was his own flesh and blood. Resting on the pristine carpet right beside my designer leather boots was a cheap, crinkled brown paper bag. It came from a rundown, 24-hour quick print shop in Queens, sitting in stark contrast to the high-end luggage of the passengers around me. Inside that modest bag were exactly 200 large, glossy photographs. The harsh smell of industrial printer ink still radiated from the paper. Those photos meticulously documented every dirty, sordid moment Julian and Cynthia had shared in various five-star hotel suites across the Hamptons. The images were vivid, undeniably clear, and utterly damning. This was not a cliché situation where a desperate mistress mailed me photos to taunt me into leaving. I was the architect of this collection. For an entire year, I quietly employed a top-tier private investigator from Manhattan to shadow his every move for 365 days. I swallowed my disgust, smiled at Julian across our custom marble dining table, and silently accepted every pathetic late-night excuse he offered. I endured the humiliation in total silence because I needed to gather an impenetrable fortress of legal evidence. I picked up my phone and dialed a number not saved in my contacts. It belonged to a notoriously pragmatic divorce lawyer based in New York, a man known for dismantling wealthy husbands with surgical precision. "Has everything been delivered to the Upper East Side apartment?" I asked, my voice as flat and chilled as the glass of coffee in my hand. The voice on the other end of the line was equally detached and purely professional. "Yes, the asset freeze has been legally executed across all accounts, and the logistics for your exhibition are fully complete." I ended the call and took a slow sip of my coffee. The board was set. The pieces were moving, and Julian was about to learn the true cost of underestimating the quiet wife. Miles away from the airport terminal, resting perfectly in the exact center of the custom glass coffee table in our Upper East Side penthouse, sat a single, neatly stacked legal document. I had signed it with a steady hand right before walking out the front door for the last time. It was a divorce settlement, but not the kind typically seen among the Manhattan elite. There were no bitter demands for alimony, no aggressive squabbling over summer real estate, and no vicious fights over stock portfolios. On the final page, right under the division of marital assets, I had written a very specific, handwritten clause. I was voluntarily walking away from the marriage claiming exactly $0 of Julian Vance's wealth. In a city where estranged spouses routinely go to war over the last available cent of a hedge fund, my absolute refusal to take a single dime was deliberate. To a man like Julian, who measured human worth strictly by bank account balances, leaving without asking for a payout was not an act of grace. It was the ultimate insult. It told him his money meant absolutely nothing to me. Right at this very moment, blissfully oblivious to the psychological bomb ticking away in his living room, Julian was holding court at one of the most exclusive, ridiculously overpriced steakhouses in Midtown Manhattan. I knew his afternoon routine flawlessly. I could clearly picture him sitting in a dimly lit, velvet-lined corner booth, meticulously slicing into a piece of premium imported Wagyu beef. He was leaning in close across the table, playing the role of the attentive, devoted partner to Cynthia. Julian always thrived on the intoxicating illusion of control. Today, he firmly believed he had finally won the ultimate prize. He thought he was successfully discarding his ordinary, useless wife to make room for his corporate equal. Elena is just a provincial girl who graduated from a public university with absolutely no backing or family connections, Julian would be telling her right now, swirling his expensive vintage red wine. I had heard him use that exact, arrogant tone of voice 100 times when discarding junior employees he deemed useless. What on earth made her think she had the pedigree to be the wife of the chief executive officer of Apex Capital, throw a few tens of thousands of dollars at her, and she will gladly take the cash and scurry away in silence? She has no leverage and no spine. Across the table, Cynthia would be laughing that triumphant, breathy laugh she reserved exclusively for boardroom victories and crushed rivals. I knew she would be casually resting her manicured hand on the crisp white tablecloth, lightly running her fingers over the massive diamond ring sitting heavily on her left hand. It was a brilliant, ostentatious stone meant to signal her victory over me. What Cynthia did not know, and what Julian thought he had brilliantly hidden from the scrutiny of the financial regulators, was how that exact ring was purchased. It was not bought with his annual performance bonus. It was financed entirely through a shadow corporate slush fund Julian had secretly established. He had been quietly siphoning money directly from Apex Capital's operational budget to fund his extravagant infidelity. After finishing his steak, Julian would dramatically pull back his tailored Italian suit sleeve to check the time on his solid gold Patek Philippe watch. He was a man who lived strictly by corporate schedules and quarterly projections. In his mind, he was currently mapping out my commercial flight path over the Atlantic Ocean. He had the timing calculated perfectly. The very moment my plane touched down in London, leaving me completely isolated and disoriented on another continent. His automated email servers would trigger a cold, legally sterile notification, drafted by his aggressive team of corporate lawyers, would land in my inbox. That digital message was meant to be the cowardly executioner of our 3-year marriage. There would be no face-to-face conversation. There would be no explanation. Just a swift corporate severing, leaving him completely free to move Cynthia into my home before the weekend arrived. He was so deeply intoxicated by his own arrogance, so utterly blinded by his self-appointed status as a master of the universe, that he never bothered to look past the surface of our initial meeting. When we first met years ago, I was carrying a generic corporate access badge, working what appeared to be a mundane, low-level assistant job at a massive office building. Julian looked at my plain clothes and assumed I was a nobody. a desperate girl looking for a golden ticket into high society. He never realized that the dull corporate entity I swiped into every morning was actually Vanguard Nexus Transatlantic Investment Corporation. He never bothered to research the shadow financial institution that quietly controlled the puppet strings of Wall Street. And most importantly, as he sat there chewing his overpriced steak and laughing at my expense, he had absolutely no idea that Vanguard Nexus was the sole, silent benefactor providing every single dollar of the capital that kept Apex Capital functioning. He thought he was the undisputed king of his own empire, completely unaware that he was nothing more than an arrogant employee working on land that I owned. At exactly 3:45 in the afternoon, the private elevator chimed directly inside our Upper East Side penthouse. Through the high-definition live feed of the covert security cameras I had strategically installed weeks prior, I watched Julian step out of his black Porsche Macan and into the foyer. He was adjusting his cuffs, likely planning to quickly pack up his collection of vintage watches and bespoke Italian leather shoes before officially bringing Cynthia into what he assumed was now his exclusive hard-won domain. He swiped his keycard and pushed the heavy mahogany double doors open. Immediately, I saw his entire body stiffen on the monitor. The sensitive high-definition microphone picked up the sharp, ragged intake of his breath. He was expecting the welcoming scent of my signature French vanilla and cedarwood perfume, or perhaps the subtle aroma of fresh white lilies our housekeeper carefully arranged every Tuesday morning. Instead, a violent, toxic wave assaulted his senses. It was the heavy, suffocating stench of industrial-grade printer ink heavily mixed with the sharp chemical bite of fresh wall paint and construction adhesive. The air inside the apartment was thick, noxious, and completely alien to his sanitized corporate existence. Julian took 2 hesitant steps forward, forcefully loosening his silk tie as a primal sense of dread began to wash over his features. He turned the corner into the expansive main living room, and the color instantly drained from his face. His knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed heavily onto the imported Persian rug. The breathtaking, panoramic glass wall that offered a multi-million-dollar view of Central Park was completely gone. In its place stood a towering, grotesque mosaic of his own betrayal. Hundreds upon hundreds of oversized, glossy photographs were plastered against the glass, entirely blocking out the afternoon sun and casting the expansive room in a sickly, artificial light. There were high-resolution images of him aggressively pinning Cynthia against the wall of the VIP boardroom at Apex Capital. There were extreme close-ups of them tangled together in the crumpled, sweat-stained sheets of a 5-star hotel out in the Hamptons. Every secret touch, every stolen kiss, every disgusting moment of their hidden affair was now magnified and proudly displayed in his own home. But the glass wall was only the beginning of the nightmare. As Julian scrambled backward like a frightened animal, his hands frantically searching for purchase on the rug, he realized the true, horrifying scale of my parting gift. From the towering vaulted ceilings down to the polished hardwood floors, every single flat surface of the penthouse was infected. The pristine marble kitchen countertops, the brushed stainless steel refrigerator, the customized Italian leather sofas, and even the minimalist art pieces he prized so highly were completely covered. I had hired a discreet team of professionals to meticulously bond the photographs to the surfaces using industrial-strength superglue. The adhesive was strictly designed for heavy construction, meaning any attempt to rip the photos down would violently tear away the expensive paint, ruin the custom finishes, and completely destroy the underlying surfaces. His pristine, perfectly curated sanctuary had been forcefully transformed into a suffocating, inescapable tomb built from his own sins. The faces of him and Cynthia were everywhere he looked, multiplied by the hundreds, staring back at him with frozen expressions of lust and greed. Suddenly, a booming voice shattered the suffocating silence, echoing off the photo-lined walls with deafening force. It was Julian's own voice. On the massive 85-inch OLED television mounted in the center of the living room, a stark black screen displayed a single, vibrating audio waveform. I had hacked into the smart home system remotely and permanently locked the volume to its absolute maximum limit. The recording, looping endlessly through the cinematic surround sound speakers, was crystal clear. It was a covert audio file from a private dinner date he had with Cynthia just 2 weeks ago. "Elena is an unequal burden." His recorded voice echoed through the apartment, dripping with pure, unadulterated contempt. The bass was so loud it caused the crystal whiskey glasses in the wet bar to rattle violently. "She contributes absolutely nothing to my empire. We need to legally corner her into a settlement where she walks away with the bare minimum. I want her completely wiped out. Cynthia, every asset, every property, firmly under our control." The audio looped back to the beginning, the sheer volume physically vibrating the floorboards beneath his expensive shoes. The psychological pressure in the room was immense, expertly designed to trigger total sensory overload. He was trapped in a claustrophobic box wrapped in his own filth, forced to listen to his own arrogant plotting at deafening decibel levels. Trembling uncontrollably, cold sweat pouring down his forehead and soaking into his custom-tailored collar, Julian crawled desperately toward the glass coffee table. There, sitting perfectly untouched in the center of the visual chaos, was the divorce agreement. He snatched it up, his bloodshot eyes darting frantically across the legal jargon until they landed on the final page. $0. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. This was not a desperate, emotional plea for his attention. This was a calculated execution. In a state of pure, unadulterated panic, he shoved his trembling hand into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He frantically scrolled through his contacts, his fingers shaking so violently he nearly dropped the device onto the floor. He pressed my name and held the phone to his ear, desperately needing to regain some semblance of control over a situation that had already destroyed him. Miles away, safely secured inside the Delta first-class lounge, my phone began to ring. The sound sliced through the quiet ambiance of the airport. I watched his terrified face on the live security feed, allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips, and prepared to deliver the final nail into his coffin. I settled into the oversized leather seat of my first-class cabin as the boarding process for my flight to London began. A flight attendant handed me a crystal glass of vintage red wine just as my phone began vibrating violently against the polished armrest. The caller ID flashed Julian's name, confirming that he had finally walked right into the center of the trap. I took a slow sip of my wine, letting the phone ring twice more to let his panic steep, before smoothly swiping the screen to answer. "Julian," I said, my voice completely serene and devoid of any emotion. "I hope you are enjoying your exclusive solo exhibition." Through the earpiece, I could hear the deafening, bass-heavy echo of his own voice still looping relentlessly from the television speakers in the living room. When he finally spoke, his voice was a raw, guttural roar that stripped away every ounce of his polished corporate facade. "You are completely insane. Elena," he screamed, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush of rage and sheer terror. "Where in the hell did you get all of this trash? Do you seriously think this cheap, pathetic blackmail attempt is going to ruin me? I have an army of lawyers. I will bury you so deep, you will never see daylight again." I let out a soft, genuine laugh that reverberated coldly through the phone line. "Blackmail implies that I want something from you, Julian. But since you are so confident in your legal team, why do you not take a short walk down the hall, go into the master bedroom and open up your custom walk-in closet? You know, the sacred space where you explicitly forbade me from ever touching your precious, tailored armor." Resting my phone against my shoulder, I tapped the screen of my tablet and switched the live security feed to the camera discreetly mounted above our bedroom door. I watched him stumble frantically down the hallway on the monitor. He burst through the bedroom doors like a madman and violently yanked the heavy closet handles open. The moment the doors swung wide, his entire body went completely rigid. Over the phone line, I heard the sharp, sickening gasp tear through his throat as the reality of his situation set in. Every single one of his bespoke Italian suits, the garments he spent tens of thousands of dollars on to project an aura of untouchable power, had been meticulously slashed to ribbons. Slices of fine wool and imported silk hung in useless, shredded strips from their velvet hangers, but the destroyed wardrobe was merely a decorative frame for the true masterpiece waiting inside. Pinned securely against the back wall of the closet were thick, bound stacks of highly classified financial documents. They were comprehensive. Uncensored bank statements from his deeply hidden offshore accounts located in the Cayman Islands. Next to those statements were the heavily redacted wire transfer logs I had painstakingly unencrypted. I had used a bright red marker to circle the exact dates and the precise multi-million-dollar amounts he had systematically embezzled from his own corporate funds to purchase a secret luxury townhouse for Cynthia. He was breathing heavily now, the sound raspy and chaotic through the receiver. He could not form a single coherent word. "You always thought you were the smartest person in the room," I continued, making sure every syllable landed like a physical blow against his shattered ego. "Did you honestly believe I was biologically incapable of having a child? You convinced yourself I was defective, using it as your pathetic, cowardly justification to seek out someone else to carry your supposedly superior legacy. Let me clarify reality for you right now. For the past 3 years, I have been secretly taking birth control pills every single morning. I actively chose to remain childless because I knew, long before Cynthia even existed in your pathetic orbit, that you were fundamentally unworthy of ever being a father to any child of mine." The silence on his end of the line was absolute. The arrogant, untouchable chief executive officer had completely evaporated. In his place stood a cornered, panicked animal who had just realized every single exit door had been firmly welded shut. "I do not want a single dollar of your dirty money, Julian," I declared, my tone dropping to a lethal, unyielding register. "I left that divorce agreement at $0 because your wealth is entirely worthless to me. What I want is much more valuable than a payout. Starting today, I am going to turn the name Julian Vance into the absolute biggest joke the New York financial world has ever seen." The moment the line went dead, the sheer gravity of his impending destruction finally shattered Julian's fragile grip on reality. Through the security cameras, I watched him hurl his phone against the bedroom wall. He scrambled out of the defiled penthouse, abandoning his ruined sanctuary without looking back. The private elevator ride down to the lobby must have felt like a descending coffin. He burst out of the heavy glass doors of the building, sprinting past the bewildered concierge, and practically threw himself into the driver's seat of his vehicle. He merged onto the Van Wyck Expressway with reckless, suicidal desperation. The engine roared as he violently wove through the dense afternoon traffic, pushing the car to 90 miles per hour. Horns blared from every direction as he narrowly avoided massive delivery trucks and commuter vehicles. His hands gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned entirely white. In his mind, there was only one singular, obsessive objective. He had to physically intercept me at the airport before I could press the button that would distribute the lethal financial documents to the authorities and the media. Back in the terminal, my phone rested silently on the polished table, the screen continuously illuminating with an endless barrage of his text messages. I watched his psychological collapse happen in real time across the digital display. At first, he tried to project power, sending furious, unhinged threats. "I will completely destroy you. I will tie you up in litigation for the rest of your natural life." But as the miles ticked by and his panic deepened, the arrogance completely dissolved into raw, pathetic desperation. The threats quickly turned into begging. "Elena, please answer the phone. We can negotiate. I will give you whatever you want. Do not destroy my career. Please do not do this to me." Every single message went ignored. I sat perfectly still, casually watching his digital tears fall into the absolute void of my indifference. 30 minutes later, Julian burst through the automatic sliding doors of the International Departure Hall at Terminal 4. He was a spectacular vision of ruin. The once immaculate, untouchable chief executive officer was entirely gone. His expensive suit jacket was missing. His custom silk tie was violently yanked loose and hung crookedly around his neck. Heavy patches of sweat stained the crisp collar of his designer shirt. and his hair was wildly disheveled. He frantically scanned the massive, crowded hall like a cornered animal searching for an escape route, his chest heaving with exhaustion. I had deliberately moved from the secluded privacy of the VIP lounge to a highly visible, reserved seating area right near the final security checkpoint, but I was no longer sitting alone. Directly across from me sat three profoundly intimidating, silver-haired men dressed in immaculate, custom-tailored dark suits. They radiated an aura of immense, quiet authority. These were not mere lawyers. They were the most senior, ruthless members of the Vanguard Nexus Board of Directors, men who moved global markets with a single phone call. Julian spotted me from across the vast expanse of the terminal. A primal, chaotic rage washed over his face. He let out a feral shout and charged blindly through the crowd. Shoving innocent travelers aside, he intended to physically grab me, to violently silence the woman he still believed was nothing more than a helpless victim. He never even made it within 10 feet of our table. Two massive, heavily armed airport security officers, working in seamless coordination with my private security detail, stepped smoothly into his path. They grabbed him by the shoulders and forcefully slammed him back against a cold marble pillar. The physical impact knocked the breath out of his lungs, but his rage was completely blinding. He thrashed wildly against the unyielding grip of the officers, his face turning a dark shade of crimson. "Elena, you are just a parasitic orphan," he screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing violently across the terminal and drawing the shocked stares of hundreds of passengers. "You are absolutely nothing. What gives you the right to judge me? I built an empire." I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I merely looked at him with the cold, clinical pity one reserves for an insect trapped in a jar. The oldest of the three men sitting across from me, the supreme chairman of the board, slowly stood up. He did not say a single word. He simply reached into his slim leather briefcase, pulled out a pristine, special edition copy of Forbes magazine, and casually tossed it onto the glass table between us. The heavy magazine slid perfectly across the smooth surface, stopping precisely at the edge, directly in Julian's line of sight. Julian stopped struggling, his bloodshot eyes locked onto the glossy cover, and the remaining color instantly drained from his face. The cover featured a high-resolution, full-page portrait of my family, the James family, the undisputed, sovereign owners of the Vanguard Nexus financial empire, and standing front and center in the photograph, radiating absolute authority, was me. The caption beneath the photograph boldly announced the return of the sole heir, officially confirming that my 3-year period of living anonymously in the United States as a lowly assistant was merely a mandatory corporate trial. I was never a penniless orphan. I was the supreme architect of the very ground he stood upon. The absolute silence in the terminal was deafening as Julian stared down at the glossy magazine cover. His brain could not comprehend the reality fracturing right in front of his eyes. I watched the last remaining traces of his supreme arrogance melt away, replaced by the hollow, terrifying realization that his entire life was a carefully constructed illusion. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the glass table, and looked at him with nothing but pure, unadulterated pity. "You really thought you were the master of the universe, did you not?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of an executioner's blade. "That massive, career-defining merger and acquisition deal you and Cynthia have been obsessively pursuing for the last 6 months. Did you truly believe a portfolio of that magnitude just fell into your lap by pure coincidence?" Julian slowly raised his head. His breath hitched in his throat. He tried to speak, but only a pathetic, raspy sound escaped his lips. "It was a short-selling trap," I stated calmly, letting the words sink into his skin like acid. "I engineered the entire portfolio from the ground up. I directed Vanguard Nexus to bundle our most toxic, highly volatile phantom assets and present them as a golden opportunity. You and your brilliant mistress were so blinded by your own greed that you leveraged every single liquid asset Apex Capital possessed to secure the deal. You bought a ghost, Julian, and right now, Your precious company is actively swallowing a financial poison pill designed to make it cannibalize itself from the inside out. The color drained entirely from his face, leaving him looking like a walking corpse. His eyes darted wildly, searching for any sign that I was bluffing, but he found nothing except the cold, unyielding stares of the Vanguard Nexus board members sitting beside me. But a financial collapse was not quite enough to balance the scales, I continued, checking the heavy gold clock mounted on the terminal wall. Exactly 60 minutes ago, I authorized a massive, unredacted data dump directly to the servers of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Securities and Exchange Commission. I gave them unrestricted access to the shadow ledgers you thought you had successfully buried. Julian stumbled backward, his legs suddenly failing to support his own weight. Right at this very moment, as you stand here sweating in an airport terminal, a small army of federal agents is raiding the Apex Capital headquarters, I told him, painting the vivid picture of his total destruction. I can imagine the scene perfectly. They are kicking open the heavy mahogany doors of the executive suites. They are placing Cynthia in handcuffs right in front of the entire board of directors. She is being formally charged with severe market manipulation and grand corporate embezzlement. Every single dollar you two stole from the company to fund your pathetic, hidden romance has been meticulously documented and handed to the federal government on a silver platter. As if summoned by the sheer force of my words, the phone in Julian's pocket began to ring. It was a harsh, vibrating shriek that made him flinch violently. He pulled the device from his pocket with a trembling, clammy hand. The caller identification displayed the name of his senior executive assistant. He swiped the screen and held the phone to his ear, his hand shaking so badly he could barely keep the speaker aligned. Even from several feet away, I could hear the sheer, unfiltered panic screaming from the other end of the line. The assistant was hysterical, sobbing as she delivered the final, fatal blow. She told him that the authorities had completely locked down the building. She screamed that the global stock price of Apex Capital was in a catastrophic freefall, completely untethered from reality. The market had reacted instantly to the Vanguard Nexus withdrawal and the federal raid. "The stock is at $0, the assistant cried out, her voice cracking through the tiny speaker. "We are completely bankrupt. Julian, the feds are saying you are looking at a minimum of 20 years in a maximum security federal prison. They are coming for you right now." The phone slipped from his lifeless fingers and shattered against the hard marble floor of the airport. Julian Vance, the ruthless financial predator, the man who believed he could discard me like yesterday's trash, simply folded in half. He dropped heavily to his knees right in the middle of the crowded terminal, completely ignoring the hundreds of travelers staring at him in shock. His body convulsed as a wave of pure, paralyzing terror washed over him. He had absolutely nothing left. No money, no power, no future, and no freedom. I stood up slowly and elegantly, smoothed out the creases in my luxurious cashmere trench coat. The 3 board members rose in perfect synchronization, acting as an impenetrable wall behind me. I walked over to where Julian was kneeling on the dirty floor. I looked down at his broken, trembling form, feeling a profound sense of closure wash over my soul. I crouched down slightly, bringing my lips just inches from his ear, and delivered my final farewell. "Julian," I whispered, my tone completely devoid of mercy. "That beautiful penthouse you loved so much, the one currently plastered floor to ceiling with the filthy evidence of your betrayal, will not be empty tomorrow. I have arranged for the doors to be permanently unlocked. I invited every major news outlet, financial journalist, and gossip publication in New York City to attend an exclusive open house. It is being officially billed as a grand exhibition of betrayal. By tomorrow morning, your spectacular downfall will be the front page story of every newspaper in the country. I wish you the very best of luck surviving your upcoming 20 years behind bars." I stood up, turned my back on him, and walked gracefully toward the first-class international boarding gate. I did not look back. Not even once. I simply handed my boarding pass to the attendant, my head held high, stepping into my rightful future as the undisputed queen of my empire. As I walked down the jet bridge, the faint, unmistakable wail of police sirens began to echo from the streets outside the terminal, rapidly growing louder as they came to collect the pathetic remains of the man I used to call my husband. Thank you so much to everyone for listening to today's story on our channel. Where in the world are you tuning in from right now? We always love knowing where our audience is located. If you truly enjoyed this story and felt the satisfaction of this grand finale, please consider supporting our team with just a $1 donation. You can easily do this by scanning the donation QR code currently displayed on your screen, or by clicking the donation link provided in the description box and the pinned comment below. Your generous support allows us to pay our hardworking staff, helping them put food on the table for their families so we can continue creating even more thrilling stories to serve you. Have a wonderful day.